They buried the truth beneath the stone, but the blood still cries out. You were taught about Salem, taught to fear the noose, the trial, the hysteria. But Salem was noise. This was silence. In the fall of 1692, while New England burned with fevered chants of witchcraft, another fire smouldered in secret. Here, in the damp, narrow streets of what would become New York City. Only this time, there were no trials, no testimonies, no names etched into court records, only barrels, sealed in wax, heavy, with something that didn't belong. They called it a plague of disappearances. But that was a lie, a phrase handed down from the very men who arranged it. 23 souls, erased, not accused, not even warned, taken. No one screamed, no one watched. Because the ones who vanished were chosen, not random, not witches, but witnesses and threats. Pause. What if I told you the real witch hunt didn't wear the robes of Puritan clergy, but the coats of colonial merchants? What if the devil didn't come with horns, but with ledgers, seals, and the authority of the crown? What happened in the fall of 1692 beneath the Dutch steeples of Manhattan wasn't superstition. It was strategy. And what they did to those 23 wasn't execution. It was elimination. One family knew the truth. They saw it coming. They tried to warn the city, but they were too late. This isn't a ghost story. It's a record of something real. A forgotten purge by men who understood fear as a tool. This is the story of the Vanderburgs. Of the map they weren't meant to possess. Of the barrels that should have never been opened. This is the witch hunt they tried to erase. And once you hear what really happened in 1692, you'll understand why they burned the archives. But the fire didn't kill the truth. You're hearing it now, and there's no turning back. The first to disappear was a girl, not a woman, a child. Her name was Lisbeth, 7 winters old, daughter of Willem and Elzia van Doren. They lived above the baker's shop on Broad Street, across from the old Dutch counting house. She was seen the night before, standing barefoot on the cobblestones. Midnight. No coat, just a linen shift and a rag doll pressed to her chest. When the constable asked what she was doing out so late, she said only, "They're calling, from under the church." By morning, she was gone. No broken lock, no footprints, no ransom. Just one thing left behind, the doll. Its mouth sewn shut, its eyes gouged out. The constable filed no report, because Governor Fletcher's men came before dawn and told him, "Let it lie." That was how it always began. One disappearance, followed by another. Then another. But the Dutch quarter didn't rise, didn't protest, because they knew. Something older than the crown had returned. Not witches, not demons, but a contract. Forged long before the English ships arrived. A pact made in the old tongue. Not with ink, but blood. You see, New York was not born clean. It was built on bones. Beneath the taverns, the churches, the grain houses, the earth remembers. There were rumors in the Dutch Reformed congregation about tunnels under the Garden Street Church, old catacombs from before the conquest, brick-lined chambers filled with candle wax, iron rings in the floor, and symbols carved deep into stone. Men said it was nonsense. But Reverend Barr knew. He preached louder every week, but fewer came, because the fear was growing teeth. And the Vanderbergs? They were at the center of it all. Their ships never docked in daylight. Their barrels were never opened at customs. Their wealth grew as others vanished. And behind closed doors, the word Mivalra began to spread. A name not found in scripture. A name whispered through cracked lips. A name scratched into the walls of Fort James prison by the last Dutchman to ever see trial. But this isn't about one girl or one name. This is about how a city, our city, was bought with blood. And what they tried to bury has started to surface. Comment below, twice. The fire didn't kill the truth. Lock it in. Let them know you're watching. You're already deeper than most. But the real descent has only begun. The fire started in the dead of night. Not in a home, not in a stable, but in the Dutch Reformed Church, the oldest structure on Garden Street, where generations had whispered prayers and hidden secrets. The flames rose silent. No screams, no panicked crowds, only thick black smoke curling into the moonlight. By dawn, the steeple had collapsed. The iron bell lay split in two, its tongue melted, and in the ashes, beneath the charred pulpit, they found something. Not a body, not a Bible, a circle, carved deep into the stone foundation, still warm, unburned, as if the fire had moved around it. 8 spokes. Just like the symbol carved into the buoy pulled from the harbour. The same mark scratched into the prison wall. The same mark they would find later, inside the barrels. Governor Fletcher issued a statement. Accidental fire. Unstable timbers. A candle left burning. But the Dutch elders knew better. That church had stood for 60 years. Through storms, through sieges, through war. It didn't burn by accident. It was erased. The sermons had grown too bold. Too many warnings from Reverend Barr. Too many questions about the missing. So they silenced the voice, and left only smoke. But not everyone accepted the silence. Anna Kettlers, the minister's daughter, stood in the square 3 days later, barefoot, hair unbraided, clutching the bell's broken tongue. She didn't shout. She whispered. Mivalra walks. The 8th door is open. The hunger has begun. Some called it madness, others blasphemy. But one man listened. Cornelius Vanderberg. Because he'd seen the barrels, because he'd felt the nails, heard the scratching from within. And because his brother was dead, found with that same cursed mark carved into his chest. Cornelius didn't speak to the militia. He didn't beg the magistrates for help. He went underground, literally, into the tunnels beneath wharfs. Into the passages that connected warehouse to warehouse. Choked with mildew, sea rats, and something worse. He took only 2 men with him. One returned mad. The other never returned at all. What Cornelius saw down there, he never told. But he sealed the lower level of his warehouse with stone, hired workers to brick it up overnight, and paid them in coin minted 30 years out of date. Why? Because he knew. Whatever had been buried was awake again, and it was using him. They called it a merchant dispute, but the blood told a different story. 3 days after the church burned, a scuffle broke out near the docks. 2 men, 1 Dutch, 1 English, both drunk, or so the report claimed. By morning, the Dutchman was dead, throat opened ear to ear, his eyes gone, removed clean. No blood around the sockets, just 2 blackened holes, burned, not cut, and carved into his chest with the precision of a surgeon, the same 8-pointed wheel. The constables buried the body. No investigation, no charges. But it wasn't just a killing. It was a message. The man, Dirk van Molen, had been one of Cornelius Vanderberg's dockhands. Loyal, silent. And the night before his death, he told a neighbor something strange. He said, "I heard something in the barrels." The neighbor asked what kind of sound. Dirk had paused, then whispered, "Breathing." That was enough. By the next morning, his mouth would never speak again. Cornelius was unraveling. He stopped attending church, stopped appearing at the exchange. He even stopped speaking to his wife. Margarita, strong as she was, began writing letters to the Stveran family estate, the only branch of her bloodline with influence in Parliament. But the letters never arrived. Intercepted, burned, buried, because this wasn't just a family being destroyed, it was a containment. The Livings and the Deepisters, the other merchant clans, were untouched. Their warehouses stayed full. Their shipments moved freely. Only Cornelius was marked. And when he tried to hire Englishmen to guard his docks, not one accepted. Even the desperate refused. Whispers were spreading. They said the Vanderberg warehouse was cursed, that something moved inside it without doors being opened, that rats fled from it, that dogs howled facing it, and worst of all, that the barrels had begun to change. One worker said he saw black wax oozing from the seams. Another swore the lids pulsed, like something alive pressed against them. And late one night, Margarita found Cornelius in the cellar, shaking. He held a crowbar in one hand and a pistol in the other. He looked at her and said, "They're not barrels anymore." She didn't ask what he meant, because deep down she already knew. This wasn't trade. It was a ritual, and her family was the altar. They came in threes. Always threes. 3 knocks on the door at midnight. 3 black feathers left on the threshold. 3 candles found burning, where no one had placed them. At first, Margarita thought she was dreaming, but then the knocks came again, always at the same hour. Always 3, then silence. No footsteps, no shadows, just presence. She asked Cornelius if he'd heard them. He didn't answer, just stared at the fireplace and whispered, "It means they've chosen." She didn't ask who, because she feared she already was the answer. On the 3rd night, a note appeared beneath their door. Not parchment, not ink, animal hide, written in blood. 3 words, "Open the cellar." Margarita dropped it into the hearth, but it didn't burn. The flames licked the edges, but the hide remained, curled, blackened, whole. They buried it under the floorboards. That night, the baby cried. Only, they didn't have a baby. The sound came from the cellar. Cornelius locked the door, hammered planks across it, smeared the frame with lamb's blood, not for protection, but for confession. Something had entered, not through the door, through them. You see, the barrels were never meant to be delivered. They were meant to wait, to ferment, to feed. And once the first one was opened, the ritual had begun. The wax that sealed them wasn't ordinary. It was mixed with grave dirt, and the rendered fat of something not fully human. Margarita discovered the recipe in one of Willem's old journals, scrawled between shipping ledgers and grain orders. Seal of 8, rendered bone, ashes of the willing. It wasn't commerce. It was containment. And Cornelius had broken it. By mistake. By greed. By ignorance. Now the hunger was loose, and it didn't need doors or bodies, just names. That's how it began claiming them. One by one, the families listed in Willem's map began to vanish. Not all at once, but piece by piece. First the cattle, then the children, then the men. No violence, no blood. Just absence. As if they had never been. And the only thing left behind, 3 black feathers, laid across the threshold, pointing inward. There was a name in the ledger that shouldn't have been there. Not a merchant, not a farmer, not even a man. Just a single word, written in Willem's own hand. Not once, but 12 times. Mevalra. Margarita traced the ink with shaking fingers. Each entry beside it bore no number, no cargo weight, no destination. Just a date. And one word. Received. 12 dates. 12 entries. 12 lives. She ran her hand down the parchment and paused on the final entry. October 31st, 1692. Still 3 days away. The last offering. She stared at it until her vision blurred. Because beneath that line, in a different ink, a different hand, one final name had been added. Elsia. Their daughter, 8 years old. Margarita didn't scream, didn't cry. She burned the ledger, ground the ashes into oil, smeared it on the cellar door, and she made a vow. If her daughter was to be the last, then the gate would close with her. She went to Reverend Barr. He listened in silence, then handed her a book, older than the Reformed Church itself. Bound in skin, not leather. Skin, no title, no table of contents, only one symbol etched into the cover, the 8-pointed wheel, but inverted. This is not scripture, he told her, but it may be justice. Inside were rites, names that turned to ash when spoken aloud, pages that bled if you read them in full, and a ritual to seal the gate again. But it came with a price. Someone had to enter, willingly, and bind themselves to the hunger, so it would feed on them alone, forever. Margarita didn't hesitate. She chose the cellar, the oldest place, where the barrels were born, where the shadow walked. That night, she kissed Elsia's brow and walked down the stairs alone. But the door did not close behind her, because Cornelius followed. And what happened in that dark, neither of them would ever tell. All we know is this. By morning, the cellar was sealed. Stone and pitch. No entrance, no sound. The barrels were gone. So was Cornelius. And in the upstairs bedroom, Elsie slept through the night. Safe. Or so they thought. The girl stopped speaking. For weeks. Not a word. Not a whisper. Just that hollow stare, like she was still watching the cellar door. They called it trauma. Said the mind protected itself. But those closest to her knew Elsie wasn't silent. She was listening. At night, she'd wake up and press her ear to the floorboards. Always the same spot, above where the door used to be. And sometimes she'd smile. Not like a child, like something else. She began drawing symbols on the walls, circles interwoven. 8 lines, always 8. The schoolmaster washed them away. She carved them into the desks. They banned her from class. So she began writing them into the dirt, outside every house on the old street. One morning, Reverend Barr found a line of them etched along the church pews. He called her a vessel, said her father had traded one gate for another. That's when the disappearances began again. But not whole families this time. Just one by one. The baker's son. Gone. His boots left standing upright in the road. Then the seamstress's mother. Disappeared mid-prayer. Then the undertaker himself. Vanished inside a sealed mausoleum. No break-ins. No signs of struggle. Only Elsia's drawings left behind. Faint, but present. They say the girl never blinked during storms. That thunder made her laugh. And once, someone saw her mouth move when there was no one else in the room. They say it was names. Names no one had spoken in generations. One man tried to burn her drawings. He lit a torch and stepped forward. But his eyes rolled white, and he collapsed where he stood, mouth full of soil. No one questioned her after that. The town grew quiet. Doors stayed bolted, windows shuttered. And Elsia, she just kept listening. One night, the new reverend asked her, "What do you hear?" She looked up, smiled, and whispered, "They're almost ready." He never returned, Ned to the pulpit. The next morning his Bible was found split open, its pages rearranged into a circle of 8, blood at the center, and the words scratched into the pew beneath it. She remembers the hunger, and the hunger remembers her. The city tried to forget her. Elsia, the child who listened through flaws, who wrote in circles, who knew too much. They buried her name in forgotten census lists, scrubbed the church books, tore down the house, but nothing stayed buried in that soil. Not long. Decades passed. Buildings rose. Streets changed names. People stopped asking questions. Until 1743, when the cellar returned. A cobbler's apprentice dug too deep behind a tavern on Maiden Lane. Found stone. Perfectly cut, dry despite the damp. A door without hinges. No lock, but sealed tight. Behind it, barrels. Dozens, stacked like bones. He pried one open with a chisel, expected wine or rot. Instead, a whisper, not from within, but behind him. He turned. There was no one there. When he looked back at the barrel, it was gone. Only the chisel remained, bent and blackened. He fled, quit his work, and told the reverend what he'd seen. 3 days later, the apprentice was found beneath the floorboards of the church, folded, backward, mouth full of wood. There were no sermons that week. Old men in the parish said it had begun again. The cycle, the circle. But no one could prove it, until the map resurfaced, drawn by Cornelius himself, found in a private archive, sealed in wax. It didn't show roads or property lines. It showed barrels, placed with ritual precision, a perfect circle, each marked with a sigil, each at a site of new construction. The old brewery, the well behind the courthouse, the chapel's foundation, 24 in all. And at the center, the home that no longer stood, Elsia's house, the final point in the wheel. But it wasn't just a drawing. It was an instruction. A guide to rebuild the gate. One offering at a time. Because the barrels weren't storage. They were mouths. And the map, a hunger spell. Geometric, deliberate, endless, just like her silence, just like her smile. They say the city walks above her still, that beneath glass towers and subway rails, and blinking neon, the circle waits, not broken, only hidden. Old stone sealed beneath new cement. And the barrels? Some were never found. Not in 3 centuries, not after floods, not after fires, not even after the grid was redrawn. The girl's geometry was stronger than steel. In 1811, during the Commissioner's Plan, surveyors marked out New York's new future. But something odd happened. No matter how they calculated, one alley wouldn't align. A narrow, crooked lane no one had seen in decades. No records, no owner, but always there. Cutting through the grid like a scar the city couldn't heal. At its end, a boarded door, painted black. And above it, carved in faint relief, 8 bind the gate, 1 walks within. They tried to demolish it, sent in a wrecking crew, but the machines stalled, the air thickened, and the lead architect coughed blood for 3 days straight. He never returned to the site. The project was rerouted, plans redrawn again, and still the alley remained. Locals avoid it. Delivery men skip it. Phones don't work there. Pigeons never land on its ledges. They say if you stand at its mouth at exactly midnight, you'll hear a girl laugh. And not a modern laugh. A deeper one. Feral, full of memory, as if something down there remembers the stone, remembers the blood, remembers being buried, but never forgotten. The archivist who found the original map was last seen stepping into that alley. All that was left behind was his wax-sealed folder. Inside, a new version of the map. Updated, modernized, still 24 barrels marked. But one thing changed. A new circle, drawn around the city's edge, twice the size, and this time, 25 sigils, one of them still unplaced. In the margin, written in the archivist's hand, "It's not a prison, it's a womb." And she's crowning. By 1852, the city was swelling. Steel. Steam. Smoke. The river stank with progress. Factories churned. The old neighborhoods were swallowed by something harder, colder. But not everything faded. The house came back. Not rebuilt, not bought. It returned. Where it had once stood on Cherry Street, a laundress saw it first. A door that hadn't been there. A stoop with steps too narrow, and a child watching from the window. In clothes no longer made, holding something in her lap. Not a doll, a book, bound in bark. The laundress told her priest. The priest told the city. When they arrived, the house was gone. But the stone remained, damp, red, smelling of lilies and ash. They paved over it, built a boarding school on top, for orphaned girls. 21 of them by the year's end. Then 20, then 17, then 12. One by one they wandered off. No signs of struggle, no notes, no bodies. Just a single thing left behind each time. A ribbon, cut perfectly in half, always placed beneath their beds, always wet. Investigators blamed it on disease, hysteria, an outbreak of madness among fragile minds. The school was shut down, demolished, the land marked unfit for building, and for years nothing happened, until 1904. A sewer worker named Thomas Bell was digging beneath the old lot to reroute drainage into the East River. He found something smooth, cold, carved. At first he thought it was a vault. Then he looked closer. It wasn't made of metal or stone. It was bone, perfectly fitted into the wall. And it was humming, not loud, just enough to feel in the teeth. Thomas left his tools behind, walked out of the tunnel, and never spoke again, not a word. He lived another 26 years, smiling, mouthing something no one could hear, until he died in 1930, with that same smile on his face, hands folded, and a ribbon in his pocket, cut perfectly in half, still wet. They tried to burn it. The alley, the stone, the memory. A secret vote among city engineers. One night, no records. They brought kerosene, lit the old path from both ends. The fire should have taken everything, but the wind reversed. Not blew, reversed. The flames folded inward, silent, cold. Witnesses said the smoke never rose. It dropped, like water, pooling into the cracks, and in the middle of it all, a sound. Not screaming, not wind, a chime, like a child dragging her fingers across the ribs of an iron gate. They found 3 of the men fused together, melted skin, twisted limbs, still alive, still breathing. But they never blinked again. City records listed it as a boiler explosion. No further inquiry. But a memo surfaced in 1961, stamped with the city seal. Marked for internal use only. Inside, a list. Known contact events, confirmed symbols, remaining witnesses, and at the bottom, status, recurrence. Estimated within 75 years, someone circled that line. Wrote a note beside it. She is learning the new tongue. Since that fire, the city has changed faster. Streets rename themselves. Buildings go up, collapse, then go up again, with no funding. People disappear, then reappear, different. Not in face, in rhythm. They forget birthdays. They hum songs that were never written. They say things like, "I don't know why, but I feel like I've always known this place." Like something's whispering through the glass, not in words, but in symbols. In the hum of the grid, the flicker of the lights, the static on the radio just before sleep. And maybe, just maybe, the city isn't growing. It's remembering, waking, calling her back. A blackout, not the kind they blame on weather. This was precise. Only 12 blocks, only for 1 hour, only where the old stone once stood. It began with the lights, not flickering, but dimming, street by street, window by window. The phones didn't cut. They whispered. No voices, just breathing. Dozens heard it, recorded it, played it back. But when they did, the tape burned, melted from the inside out. One girl, a switchboard operator named Elsie Parr. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She walked into the street, sat in the center of the intersection, and began drawing. Circles, overlapping, layered like teeth, with her fingernail, until it cracked. She was taken away, institutionalized, diagnosed with schizophrenic fugue, but her doctor kept notes. Hundreds of them. He wrote, "She doesn't seem mad. She seems connected, like she's on a party line we can't hear." Elsie died in 1963. No illness, no trauma, just stopped. At 3:17 a.m., during another blackout, and beside her bed, a ribbon, cut perfectly in half, still wet, but this time stitched with thread, black thread, into the shape of a letter, not in English, something older, something not found in any known alphabet. But it kept showing up, scrawled in subway tunnels, scratched into elevator doors, woven into graffiti no one remembers painting, always the same shape, always near water, and if you trace it slowly with your finger, your skin tingles, as if it's remembering something your blood forgot. No one talks about Elsie Parr anymore. But sometimes, on dead frequency radios, her voice bleeds through. Just one sentence, spoken in perfect calm. She only needs one city, and every year it sounds closer. There was once a tunnel. No name, no plans, no end. It began beneath Chambers Street. Workers digging utility lines found it in 1951. Bricked shut. But humming. Not electricity, not machines. A human hum, low, continuous, like someone praying from the other side. The city sealed it, ordered cement, welded plates. 3 weeks later, the plates rusted through. The cement cracked, and inside, fresh footprints. Bare, wet, but no water, just dust, cold and dry, like something crawled through time instead of earth. Then came the noises. Children in the apartments above complained of knocking, always 3 times, always at 2:06 a.m. One mother listened at the vent. She didn't hear knocking. She heard a lullaby, not sung, whispered, in a voice too old for any throat. She moved out the next day, left everything behind, even her daughter's drawings. On the walls, dozens of stick figures, all wearing hats, tall ones, pointed, with lines drawn across the eyes, not blindfolds, bindings, each figure missing a mouth. Except one. That one was smiling. Big. Too big. And next to it, written in crayon, "This one's still learning." The tunnel has no map. It shows up in blueprints, then vanishes. Inspectors go down and don't come back. Until one day they do. But changed. Not in face, in pace. They stop blinking. Forget how elevators work. Say things like, "It was always beneath the city. We just built on top of it." And when they sleep, they grind their teeth. Hard. So hard it echoes through the walls. One man bit through a spoon. Another started whispering to wires. Not nonsense. Names, over and over. And when asked who the names belonged to, he smiled and said, "She knows them now." And down in that tunnel, something still breathes. In 1961, a boy disappeared from a locked school. Public record says asthma attack. But that's a lie. His name was Edgar Blaine. 9 years old. Top of his class. Perfect attendance. One day he raised his hand in math and just stopped moving. Still breathing. Still blinking. But gone. The teacher called his name. No response. Edgar stared at the blackboard for 6 straight minutes, then smiled. Not childlike, not warm. It was a knowing smile. Too wide, too calm. And he said, "They're learning through me now." Then he ran. Not to the hallway, not to the door, to the janitor's closet, the one they never opened. Because it was sealed, nailed shut since 1939. But when they reached it, the door was open, and Edgar was gone. Inside, no dust, no mop, no cobwebs, just a single object, a cone-shaped iron hat, twisted at the top, like it had been pulled by something with hands. The school closed that year. They blamed it on funding. But that's not the reason. Not when 5 other children started drawing the same thing. A tower. No windows, no doors, but always a single red line running from top to bottom, and around the tower, figures. Hundreds, all wearing hats, pointed, tilted, facing the same direction, downward. When asked what it was, one child said, "It's the mouth she left open." Another just cried. Years later, when the school was demolished, they found something beneath the floorboards of that closet. Not bones, not books. Rows of teeth. Perfect. White. Human. Too many to count. None had roots. Just the crowns, filed down, polished, arranged in a spiral, like a message or a map. But no one's ever figured out where it leads. Only one investigator ever tried to follow it. He went missing in '74. But before he vanished, he sent a single note to his wife. Just one line. She's building her choir, and if you stand outside where that school once stood, you can still hear a child's voice, singing. There was a ledger, hidden in the cornerstone of a burned church on Eldridge Street. No cover, no title, just pages, bound in old thread and something that looked like leather, but not animal. The ink was red, still wet. It listed names, not congregants, not clergy, children, hundreds of them. Beside each name, a date, a strange symbol, and a phrase repeated every 3 pages. The mouth must be fed. The church was built in 1802, burned down in 1866. But no one remembered the fire, not even the fire department. And when researchers tried to find the original blueprints, they found something older, buried beneath. An earlier structure. No architect, no record, just a sketch, with one word scribbled in the margins: observation. The church had no windows, only vertical slits. Not for light, for watching. The pews were bolted facing inward, not toward the altar, but toward a pit, right at the center, 10 feet wide, bricked around the edges like a well. But it wasn't for water. At the bottom, they found bone fragments. Small, delicate, burned from the inside out. A fire that began inside the body. One historian said, "This wasn't worship. It was a transaction." Then he stopped speaking. 6 months later, he was found walking barefoot through Lower Manhattan, eyes open, but blind, repeating one sentence. "We sang too loud. She heard us." The ledger vanished from the archive that week. No footage. No logs. Just a smear of red on the shelf where it had been kept. And ever since, at 3:13 a.m. every Friday, someone calls the old church office line. No one speaks. Just breathing. Then a child's voice, faint and distant. "We're still in here?" Then the line goes dead. A woman came forward in 1979. Said she had been a midwife in the city's oldest tenement. Back when babies were born, not in hospitals, but behind curtains, on blood-stained floors, with hands that trembled. She delivered over 70 children in that building. But there was one she could never forget. It was a cold January night. Mother was silent, unconscious, no pulse. But the belly kept moving. The child was alive, so she cut, alone. No light, no prayer. And when the baby came out, it didn't cry. It didn't move. It smiled. And the smile wasn't right. lips too wide, teeth already formed, and its eyes were open. Not glazed, not cloudy, focused, staring at her. The woman froze. She tried to speak, but the baby did something impossible. It reached up, touched her cheek, and whispered, "You've seen her." The mother died that night, but her body didn't cool, not for 3 days, and every night the child vanished, then reappeared in its crib before dawn. The midwife moved away, but every year, on the anniversary of that night, she received a letter, handwritten, no stamp, no return address, just a line, "You brought me through," and below that, a drawing of a woman, mouth open, head tilted, wearing a hat made of bone. Each year, the drawing grew more detailed, until the final one showed the woman standing outside the midwife's apartment. Same smile, same eyes, same whisper written beneath in red ink. "I never left." The midwife was found the next morning. No sign of forced entry, no struggle, just her body, frozen in place, eyes wide, mouth open, and beside her, a single infant's handprint burned into the wall. There's a door in City Hall. It's not on the blueprint, it's not on any tour, and no one remembers it being installed. But it's there. Tarnished brass. Frame too narrow. No handle on the outside. Just a knocker, shaped like a tongue. If you press your ear to the wood, you'll hear breathing. Slow, measured, too large to be human. Security footage shows one thing. Every night, at 2:11 a.m., the door opens exactly 1 inch. No key, no personnel nearby. Nothing triggers it. Just open, then closed. And yet, every morning, someone is missing. Not a politician, not a janitor, someone connected to the oldest bloodlines in New York. The founding families. The ones who owned land before land had names. You won't find their names on plaques, but their symbols are carved into the foundation stones of every building within 10 blocks. When one vanishes, no alert is issued. No photo circulates. Just a silent update to the old book kept in the basement vault, bound in skin, lined in teeth. The book never lies. Every page smells of iron, and each new name appears as a scar, not ink. The page burns as it writes itself, and beside each name, returned. Historians tried to remove the door once. Contractors arrived at dawn. By noon, 3 of them had gouged out their own eyes. The 4th vanished mid-sentence while filing a work order. The paperwork caught fire on the desk. No source, no spark, just smoke, and a scream that came from beneath the floorboards. They stopped trying after that. Now, it's tradition. Every decade, a child from one of the 13 families is brought to the door on their 13th birthday. They knock once and listen. If the door breathes back, the child never speaks again. If it doesn't, they are crowned, not with gold, with silence. And silence is the only power New York truly obeys. There was once a library beneath the Hudson. No signs, no stairs, just a tunnel that didn't exist on any map made after 1902. You had to walk through water to reach it, past rusted ladders, forgotten pipes, and bricks that pulsed like living tissue. They called it the Wet Archive. It housed only one thing: records of what should have never happened, not what did. What was never allowed. What was erased. Ship manifests with extra names. Court documents signed in blood. Birth certificates with no birth. And in the center, a vault, round, sealed, carved with 13 symbols, so old even the masons called them cursed. Inside, audio, reels, tapes, cylinders wrapped in wax and twine. They hummed, even when unplugged. One researcher listened, just once, just a sliver. She screamed, then stopped, then wrote 46 pages of what she heard. No punctuation, no spaces, just a stream of words that bled down the page like oil. The pages were confiscated, locked, then buried. But one sentence survived, carved into her desk. They didn't drown in the flood. They followed her. The water level rose the next week, unseasonal, unexplained. Divers sent to investigate disappeared. Sonar cut out. And then, a sound from the riverbed. Not mechanical, not natural. A lullaby, sung in a voice that matched no known frequency. Female, ageless, in a language older than salt. They sealed the tunnel after that, poured concrete, posted guards. But sometimes, on moonless nights, you can still hear it. That voice, rising from the drain pipes of old buildings downtown, singing to someone who never left, calling them by name. There's a window in St. Mark's Chapel, 3rd floor, west wall, hidden behind a false panel. It only reflects what was, not what is, not what should be. If you stare into it long enough, you won't see yourself. You'll see who was supposed to stand there in your place. The version of you that never made it. Some say it's a trick of the light, old glass, old warps in the lead, but the priests avoid it. And once, a child looked into it and wept for a full hour. When asked why, he whispered, "That boy in the glass has no eyes, and he smiles too wide." The chapel keeps no record of who installed the window, but old blueprints mark the spot with one word, entry. To what? No one knows. But strange things happen around that room. Time skips. Watches spin backward. Phones don't work. Candles refuse to burn. And the air feels thick, like something is pressing back. Years ago, a group of urban explorers broke in. They found the window. One took a photo. Only the window appeared in the picture. No room, no people, just black glass, and a single word etched across it, confess. That explorer vanished the next week. His friends say he walked into the subway at 3:03 a.m., but never came out the other side. His last message was a voicemail, just breathing. And one whisper, "I saw him again. He's still smiling, and now he's on this side." The chapel is still open. Tourists walk past it every day. They never look up. They never feel the cold. But if you ever do, if you ever see that window and feel like someone's watching, don't wave. Don't smile. Don't try to find your reflection. Because if you look and see it staring back, it means you were never supposed to exist. There was an exorcism in New York, but no priest was called, no Bible, no crucifix, just silence. A silence so thick they had to drill holes in the walls to let sound back in. It happened in the winter of 1692, but no one spoke of it until the spring of 1974. A janitor at an abandoned courthouse found a box buried under the floorboards. Not wood, not metal. Something softer, wrapped in skin. Inside, 9 pages of testimony, written in charcoal on stretched vellum, signed in a name that doesn't translate, and a drawing. A girl, bound, mouth sewn shut. But her eyes, they bled. Not tears, not ink, but names. Rows and rows and rows of names. One of them was the janitor's. He told no one, just vanished. But the courthouse, it changed. Cold in summer, warm in winter. Doors opened to stairwells that had no bottom. One judge, sent to catalogue the site, descended for 12 minutes before crawling back out, blind. He said he saw a room full of children, each one facing a mirror, each one humming a lullaby. He knew from childhood, though he'd never learned it. He retired the next day. The report was never filed, but we have the tape, 6 minutes of ambient noise. Then a voice, a woman's, soft, barely audible. You didn't cast it out. You just taught it to wear your face. The courthouse was sealed in 1980, declared unsafe. They said the foundation was cracked, but that's not true. It still stands, perfect, untouched, just fenced off, just quiet, too quiet. And on some nights, if you stand close, you'll hear it. The humming, the mirrors, the girl with sewn lips and open eyes, and the names you haven't told anyone. Not yet, not out loud. But somehow, it already knows. They thought the last witch died in Salem. They were wrong. She never died. She just moved south, changed her name, learned the sound of subway brakes and electric light. She found the cracks in the city, places too old to be remembered, but too cursed to be torn down. They called her Mother Grieve. She didn't hide. She opened a school. Only 2 students at a time. No one remembered applying. They were just chosen. Always orphans, always quiet, always returned, different. Not bad, not broken, just wrong. They spoke in echoes. Their eyes blinked, out of sync. One boy, aged 10 years, in a single night. His hair turned white. He spoke backwards for the rest of his life. Said he saw her heart once. Said it was a lock with no key. And something was knocking from the inside. The school burned down in 1903. No survivors. But 3 weeks later, someone mailed a letter to the mayor's office. No return address. Just 4 words on scorched parchment. She's still taking students. The handwriting matched a man who had died in 1842. No explanation was given. But around the ruins the ivy grew faster, and some nights you can hear a bell ring. Twice. Then silence. Then a whisper. Time for class. People avoid that corner now. Even pigeons won't land there. The ground feels soft, not like dirt, like breathing. And once, a child vanished there. No sound. No struggle. Just gone. Except for his backpack, neatly zipped. Inside, a single note. She says I passed. No one ever rebuilt. But the foundation remains. And if you step close, really close, you might hear your name being spelled letter by a voice that sounds like yours, only older, colder, and waiting. There's a door in Manhattan that no one has ever opened. Not once. Not in over 300 years. It's built into the side of a church that doesn't appear on any map. No sign, no records, no congregation. Just a bell that rings only when someone dies near water. They call it the seventh door. It's made of wood no botanist has ever identified, and carved from top to bottom in symbols that don't belong to any known language. Except one. One glyph, just above the handle, matches a mark found in burned settlements across early New York. Some say it's the witch's mark. Others say it's older, much older. When lightning struck the bell tower in 1928, firefighters arrived within minutes. The entire church was in flames. Except the door. It didn't burn. It didn't smoke. It didn't even get warm. They tried to pry it open. Axes snapped, chains melted. A priest tried holy water. He lost his voice for the rest of his life. Said he heard his mother screaming from the other side. She'd been dead for 20 years. In 1955, a researcher stayed overnight to document the architecture. His tape recorder captured 7 hours of audio. All silence, except one moment, right before dawn. A child's voice. "You're almost ready now." That researcher jumped from his apartment 2 weeks later. No note, no signs of distress. Only a single key left on his desk. It didn't match any lock in his home. But it matched a sketch of the seventh door made in 1693. That sketch was sealed in a vault beneath the city. And yet, he drew it exactly. Every curve, every symbol, even the fingerprint smudge in the lower right corner. It's still there, still sealed. But lately, the city's been hearing things, in pipes, in alleyways, in dreams. The sound of knocking, 3 times, then a breath, then a voice. Yours, but not yours. Saying, "Come in." They thought witch hunts were hysteria. Panicked mobs, old fears, burned pages of history, best forgotten. But they were wrong. They weren't hunting witches. They were feeding them. And New York, it wasn't the escape. It was the offering. In 1692, 10 women fled Salem, branded heretics, marked for death. But one of them, Marjorie Bell, had a gift. She could walk without leaving footprints, speak without moving her lips, turn mirrors into windows no one wanted to look through. She made it here, to the island, back when Manhattan was swamp and shadows. She built a circle, not a coven, not a cult, something older, something that didn't need a name. And they didn't cast spells. They listened to something beneath the bedrock, a hunger, a voice. It promised power. All it asked for was memory. They gave it names first, then secrets, then whole histories, entire families erased from record. Then came the trials, not to stop witches, but to protect them, to redirect suspicion, to feed the fear, to bind the silence. The more people screamed, the stronger the veil became. You see it now, don't you? Why some names were never passed down, why some graveyards have no stones, why some buildings just disappear from city records without a trace. Marjorie didn't die. She became something else. Each generation, she takes a new face, a new role, a new seat close to power. And every century, once, only once, she calls, the circle back, to open the door again. And guess what? It's almost time. The sky's been red at midnight. Rats have vanished from whole neighborhoods, and children, the gifted ones, have started speaking Latin in their sleep. But the worst part? No one's alarmed. No headlines. No panic. Because no one remembers what came last time. No one's left who could. Except you. And now you're listening. And now you're marked. They buried it under Wall Street. Not a building, not a secret, a heart, still beating, still warm. Beneath concrete glass and 30 layers of corporate denial, it pulses. Once every hour, but only for those who've heard it before. And lately, too many have. It was Marjorie's final act, before she vanished in 1721. She walked alone into the marshland where the city's foundations were barely bones, and she cut out the last piece of her humanity, her heart, wrapped in linen, soaked in oil, buried beneath a sycamore tree older than time. She said, "When men trade souls for gold, the world will forget itself." And they did. They built banks. They signed papers. They shook hands, above soil still wet, with things they couldn't pronounce. You've felt it, haven't you? In the silence, between subway cars. In the flicker of old lights at the corner of Pine and Nassau. The feeling that something beneath you is watching. Not to harm, to wait, for the circle, for the opening. Every 111 years, a breach appears, not visible, not physical, but felt. People vanish. Buildings crumble in perfect symmetry. Fire alarms ring, with no heat detected. It happened in 1810. Then again in 1921. And now, look around. Children are drawing the same symbol in classrooms. Archivists report whole shelves missing overnight, and one woman living alone in Soho woke to find a wooden circle carved into her floor. No marks of entry, no signs of force, just words etched inside. Remember her. You still don't believe? Check the archives. But don't expect to find Marjorie's name. It's not written. It's remembered. By those who listen too long. By those who speak her story aloud. By those who hear the knock 3 times. Then silence. Then your own voice, answering back. They didn't kill the witches. They hired them. They didn't burn the knowledge. They bound it in city seals, courtroom oaths, and the fine print of every building permit since 1784. The trials weren't a purge. They were a ritual, a trade, blood for silence, memory for power. And the heart of it all, still beating under stone, feeds not on flesh, but on forgetting. The more you forget, the stronger it becomes. The more you dismiss, the louder it laughs. That's why you've never heard of Marjorie Bell. Why no school teaches the true reason New York's skyline casts no shadow at noon on Midsummer's Day. Why no map marks the original well at Maiden Lane? Because the city was never built on dreams. It was built on deals, on names scratched out in red wax, on oaths sworn in the old tongue, on a promise, We give her the forgotten, and she will leave the rest. But lately, she's hungry. Too many remember. Too many ask. And now you've listened all the way through. That's not safe. Because this story, it doesn't end with you knowing. It ends with you deciding. Do you forget what you've heard? Do you turn off the screen, laugh, walk away, and pretend none of it mattered? Or do you write it down? Do you speak her name? Do you feel your chest tighten when you see a circle carved into stone where it shouldn't be? Because the watchers, they're already listening. The ones who survived the last opening, they've seen this pattern before. The knock, the silence, the breath on your neck that isn't yours. And when it begins again, when the veil thins, when the red mist returns to the sky, they won't warn you. They'll vanish, just like the last time. And the only ones left behind will be the ones who refused to forget.